All right. Welcome to our uh, our exercise 3 um, for a rolling pipe offset. So, last video we went through how we set that up, which I've still got up on my screen right now. And I think I introduced that I wasn't going to go the whole way through this drawing with you, because once we've got to this point, it's just like our a single offset now, the way I developed this. But I do want to kind of get started on that and have a look at my finished drawing. So I'll just walk you through the first steps of how we would set this up, and I can just work with what I've set up here. So I could just get rid of this stuff right now. You'll have this file as a separate file, and you'll be able to review it. And for my sakes, I'm just going to kind of get rid of some of the information that we use to establish it. And because where I've got it already set up how I want to draw it, I'll just kind of strip it down here. So one thing I do if I've used this kind of and drawn this as a polyline and it's all connected, I like to explode those and get that, because this is that middle center run of pipe, and get that sitting by itself. I wasn't sure what I made the lengths of these when I actually did this drawing, so I can actually delete these for a minute. I think I've told you that I like to use yellow on my center lines, so actually maybe on this one I'm just going to go ahead and change it to yellow. That is now my travels pipes center line. And to keep with what the same way we set up the single offsets, I think I just said these arbitrary length runs up here. It doesn't really matter the length. I think I've said make them the pipe diameter. So this is 4.5 inch OD tube that we're drawing this as. So I'll just make this 4.5. I think maybe on that existing drawing they're a little bit longer than that. So repeat that command. Pull these down, that 4.5. And now I've got kind of my setup for my pipe run, my pipe offset. I might just change these just to a white. Okay, so this offset became that missing length, and use that as my offset length that we found through a couple of triangles. This run was really given at the beginning of the exercise with the information, that 4.25 inch run, I think. So that's really the biggest thing. If I actually develop this the other way, using the offset in kind of the run position, it does change. That offset. So I do have to be aware of which one is run, which one is offset. So, and knowing that this offset consists of my roll and my vertical offset in kind of one figure here. So, got it. So once we got to this point, if we remember, the way I liked to work was establish yourself some layers. And you'll see when I go to my finished drawing, I'll kind of talk you through that too. But establish yourself some new layers. This one already had some existing layers, but because you can kind of take and maybe some of this information, and if you dimension it to make sure you've got the right figures in the right place, maybe you want to choose to push that to a layer that you could like snap off. And I just established these new layers, so then, because a lot of times I'll put in these development triangles, I will dimension them so I make sure I've got the right figures in place, and then once I get that initial pipe run laid out, center line of pipe, I will, or tube in this case, I will then go ahead and turn off, say, my layer that I use to. Yeah, good. And then I would have established, and then even from here, I've got to like bisect this So I might move to layer 2. Now I'm drawing on layer 2. And this is where I would bisect this line to get that center line of that middle gore. And so I would do, if you remember doing that, it was check out your bisect the line video. There's my halfway mark, pull it over halfway, copy that to the other point at the end of the line. Bam, now we got this nice and this is the other thing I just wanted to hit. Remember, I didn't want to use polylines to do this next line in case they're a little too short when I'm hitting these intersection points and putting in a line. If those are too short, I feel like I can lengthen just a regular line more accurately than a polyline. And that's really just an AutoCAD thing there, but I've got it. Maybe I wanted that to be a solid line. And that's the real information that I'm keeping there, right? So, you know, maybe I push this to my main layer. And now start drawing on layer 3. When I do that, I can just turn off that layer 2 and got my information that I really needed from that step. And then I can move to layer 2, which is bisecting the angle, establishing the miter angles here. So what that takes is a similar point. Right? That circle, that first circle I use, establishes the, you know, from the miter intersection center line there, that miter point, establishes that same distance out on both those lengths of pipe, and then I can do this step at the same time over here because this establishes, you know, I can use that circle to establish these same points, and then maybe I would change color to do the next circles, but these ones just need to be, you know, bigger than this center point here, but still they're just an arbitrary length, and I would copy that, or arbitrary diameter. I just got to make sure I choose the right center point that I'm picking from right there. Bam. All right. So that ends up being my upper miter line, and I think, you know, if I switch over to, I think I made these red just to be a real defining point. Make these a line, and I'm looking for these points of intersection here, right? So that's good. That's my upper miter line. If I go back to my layer 3, make sure that's where I'm putting these circles, these developments on layer 3, and then I'll be able to turn them off once I get these miter lines. So maybe that lower, even though this white circle is the same, you know, maybe I would use a different colored circle because it'll confuse me if I see that intersecting my other purple, my upper purple my upper purple reference lines. So that was pulled from this center line and this center line. Awesome. Switch over to my main drawing tab. Switch to the color, my line type. Draw that as a line. This is just that intersection point, and over to here. This is a little tricky one. I got a lot of things coming together at the same place. Make sure I grab the right point. I got a couple options here. Just the way I pulled my circles. So awesome. There's my miter lines. There's a bunch of circles that are making a mess out of my bunch of radiuses I was picking up. So I can just clean that up. Go ahead and turn off layer 3, and now I'm ready to develop the actual pipe diameter where they meet the miter line, then put in my orientation lines, and you know, as I divide my 4.5 inch tube, bring those development lines all up, those will have the information I need to make my pattern. So I just walked one more time through kind of the setup of the critical lines I need before I start drawing in the rest. So yeah, for the finishing of this, just kind of reference the single offset from kind of our class exercise when we did it. I think it was at class exercise 2. This has kind of been class exercise 3. I'll briefly show you my finished drawing. You know, this is with all the layers on. So this is the same one that I was just kind of starting on the last page. You can see, I mean, these things turn into a mess. That's why I have all these layers that I can toggle on and off. And maybe I can see here, maybe I've made these kind of pretty short upper and lower runs, which is totally arbitrary. I've just kind of gone with that, you know, the distance to the, it's just like the diameter of whatever I'm working with is how far I'm coming up off that triangle. So if it was, and that's really easy to trim down short. What it would do is, you know, my pattern in that other drawing as I started, it might have a kind of a longer end gore here, but I could take that up like this pattern looks and just like trim that off straight, because all that is just a rectangle that I'm kind of trimming out. This is my real key information. And then whatever distance this is right here is like, this is a weld joint and this is another possible weld joint. So, you know, maybe I need to get those a little further away from each other for a code. Maybe for some applications it doesn't matter and I can just make my, you know, make these pretty short here. So, you know, maybe that gets into the welding engineering phase a little bit more, or if we're looking at a code, what we'd be shooting for. But what I like to show here is I've just like been given the information, which that kind of should say tube diameter, but it's a, I'll change that right here while I'm in this. I can just modify this. I just changed it to a tube because it was 4.5 inches OD, and that could be 4-inch pipe, but I just kind of wanted to throw in a tubing figure here. So this tube diameter is 4.5 inches. This is the same information we just set up. And I just took that information right off the bat and set up my first triangle, knowing that my vertical offset in my roll set up a 90-degree triangle. And then my second one is going to use the run. So when you come down here, I just do that really quick, right? I just do like my roll and my vertical offset, pick up this length, which happens to be, you know, ends up being the same distance of the offset we used. I use that now for my offset distance. And there comes my run in the figure there, 4.25. That established that travel the same way we did when we started. And from there, I just developed it out. And what's nice about having these on different layers is I can just peel this thing back. And so this is how you can kind of manipulate my drawings that I set up for you. You can just strip these back to like, oh, it's step 1. There it is, step 1. I started with that that initial setup, and then you can just kind of turn these on as I go. Step 1B, I don't know what that was. Step 2, looks like I dimensioned, made sure my dimensions were correct, make sure I was drawing in the correct plane here, or, you know, in the correct way. Looks like I bisected my travel there. And then I went ahead and established my miter angles. And so now I know that that's what I did, those two, plus dimensioned and checked. Step 5 was, this is where we would have gone in our next step on the drawing I was drawing, is put in the diameter of pipe, bring them up to the miter lines, establish all these points of orientation lines, and would have gone to pulling the information off the lower gore to establish this at the right circumference. I would have probably used 4.5 inch OD times pi. Not worried about essentially making this out of paper, not worrying about it being made out of metal. And then went to the middle gore, because this one I can just multiply by 2, right? This lower gore and upper gore are symmetrical, so I can just use that pattern twice. And now I just got to finish the middle gore, and to do that I just establish the same circumference line and start pulling these off of, using this as the center point, that bisected travel as the point to snap these lines to, these orientation lines across here. So, and And then the final one, I think I just probably finished that out to the side. I kind of left that up as a reference. So maybe I did this just a little bit different than the first time, but left this up as kind of a reference step, and then maybe copied this over here, and then just copied all those across and rotated them. I probably rotated them all to the center point, and then mirrored them over, and then finished the pattern. And then I've probably gone through the process of taking this, maybe making a copy of it, mirroring it or rotating it 180 degrees, and then trying to see if it fits into this, these two ends of the pattern, if they fit together well. So yeah, that would have been kind of our exercise 3, and there'll be a homework assignment to go with that. And you know, we may look at a couple different of those, working with that rolling offset a couple different times with some different dimensions. And from here, we'll probably go into gored elbows. So we'll catch you in the next lesson, probably lesson 4 at that point. So